Hi there, and thank you so much for checking out this bullet journal video. February is fast approaching and I was kind of unsure about what to do for my theme this month. I have like a massive list of theme ideas that I write down whenever something comes to me, and usually every month I look through the list and then don't use any of them and come up with something else. And this month was no different. I was looking through my list and I had picked one and I was like, right, I'm gonna do that. And then I just went to draw it and I really wasn't feeling it. But then I looked at a notebook that my sister got me for Christmas, and on the cover it had like a pinky moon on a darkish background, and it's super pretty and it has like gold accents on it as well. So I was kind of thinking maybe I can recreate a similar design in my bullet journal this month. So I really wanted the background to be like a really deep midnight blue. Initially I had thought I was going to use acrylic or gouache paints and paint that straight into the journal. I didn't have the right colours though, unfortunately, so I had to use watercolours instead. And these journals can take a certain amount of watercolour, but because I wanted the colour to be really intense and kind of uneven, I wanted to blob the paint in different areas and make it thicker in some areas and lighter in other areas. I thought it would be best to do it on watercolour paper. And whilst that was drying, I grabbed a piece of scrapbooking paper and I grabbed a template of a crescent moon and just drew around that and cut out the shape. I made the template beforehand just by drawing around the bottom of a glass. When the watercolour sheet was dry, I cut around the edge, and I didn't want it to be even, so I didn't measure it and cut straight lines or anything. I wanted it to have sort of like a smooth but uneven edge. And then when that was done, I just placed my moon down. I didn't stick it straight away because I wanted to paint the additional bits onto my paper first, and then be able to move the moon around if I needed it in a different position. I used gold paint to add some tree branches at the top above the moon. And I'm just using a punch to punch out these little tiny flowers from the same paper that I used to cut out the moon. This paper is super thin, so I had to put another sheet of paper behind it because the punches were just ripping the thin paper. So yeah, I found if it was a double thickness, then that saved the paper from being damaged. And once those were all cut out, I just used some glue to stick them down on the end of each branch. And then once I was happy with the placement of those, I went back in with a little bit of gold paint and added a few leaves here and there, but not too much because I didn't want it to become super busy and I wanted to keep the definition of each of the flower petals. And I just did exactly the same thing on the other side. And I'm kind of thinking now that maybe I should have saved this for March because it's kind of like blossom, and the blossom comes out in March and stuff, but I was kind of really excited about this idea when I did come up with it and I just didn't want to wait. So after that was done, I started to paint in my title. I was umming and ahhing about this for ages because I didn't have a decent gold pen to use, and I am not used to using a paintbrush for calligraphy. I have not practiced this at all, but I was like, nah, it'll be fine. But then as I started to do it, I was like, oh my god, this is not fine, I hate this. But actually, I don't think it turned out too bad. I think I salvaged it. I was kind of going for a slightly naive style of calligraphy anyway, but I think maybe it was going a little bit more naive than I had intended. But I think it's fine, yeah, it's okay. And then underneath, I just continue with that same gold colour and paint in a load of different leaves. Leaves are just one of my favourite things to paint. They're so therapeutic because they're just really simple shapes, but they always look beautiful. And also that gold on the deep blue, I just think looks so gorgeous, and just really cool patterns. I love them. So once the gold paint had dried out a bit, I then stuck my moon down where I wanted it, and then stuck the whole piece of watercolour paper down onto the front page. I am super happy with this design. I love how it came out. I really love that juxtaposition of very dark colour and then that soft pink colour as well. And the gold just pops so nicely off of that colour too. Okay, so on to the next page, which is going to be my calendar as usual. And I wanted to do some similar decoration on this page again. So I started off with painting my watercolour paper, just to give it enough time to dry while I draw out the rest of the page. This month I am going for individual boxes for my calendar. Sometimes it is a bit annoying to have to draw them all out because it is quite time consuming, but I do really like how it looks, so it's worth it in the end. And I personally like to have a nice big box each day so that I can write down what's going on throughout the month. At the top of all my boxes, I use my gold paint again just to write the letter of each day of the week. I always start my week from a Monday. I know some people prefer Sunday, but I am a Monday gal. Then I added my title in with the gold paint. I definitely need some more practice with this paintbrush technique. It's not my forte. You can actually use this paint with dip pens, which I didn't think of at the time. I do have some, but they're buried somewhere and I haven't used them for absolutely years, so I probably couldn't get a good result with that either. But I think this turned out okay. It's not horrendous. I am 70% happy with it. And in the space to the left, I did some more tree branches with the blossom on. I decided not to do a blue background in this bit because I was having quite a large area of blue on the other side of the page, so I didn't want to make it too dark. When my watercolour paper was dry, I cut it out again, keeping those sort of soft, uneven edges. I cut another moon out of the pink paper and stuck it to the top. I put it facing the opposite direction this time, just to change it up a little bit. And I added a little quote underneath using a white Jelly Roll pen. Just something really simple, fly me to the moon. No real deep meaning here this time. I thought it was just a cute little saying, and it looks really nice on the blue background. Using quotes is always a difficult one for me because I do really like hand lettering and like the artistry of it, but quite often I find some quotes to be a bit cheesy, but at the same time they have like a good message behind them. So I'm kind of torn about using them sometimes, but let me know what you think in the comments. Do you always use them? Do you never use them? Are you kind of on the fence about quotes like me? I'd love to hear your thoughts. In the space at the bottom, I found some washi tapes I had that kind of matched the theme. One that just sort of had pink roses and leaves on it, and then this other one which is a pinky peach colour and had some gold foil on it, which I think matched perfectly. And just to finish off the page, I added a few sparkles here and there with some gold paint. Moving on to my next page, and this is going to be my habits and trackers. I'm kind of reverting back to my horizontal layout for this one. I stopped doing this for a few months last year because I'd been doing it for ages and I just kind of felt like I needed to change it up, but after going back to the vertical one and just having one page for my plant watering tracker and one page for my habits, I just kind of wasn't really loving it. I find it quite difficult to add decoration around it because it just takes up so much space and just kind of looks a bit bland and I don't love it. So yeah, I just went back to this one, and I know I've used it a lot, but it just really works for me and I like it. I do like to put my habits into the individual calendars as well sometimes, but it takes a long time to draw all of those calendars out, so if I'm not really in the mood for lots of number writing, then I tend to go for this layout. But yeah, I do like that layout as well, so I will definitely do those at some point too. I did a tiny little blossom branch up at the top again and added some more washi tape. I wanted to add some more colour into the boxes, so I grabbed a Tombow brush pen just to add a really light pink to the top and the bottom, and I was going to do the column as well with all the titles in, but I realised that the ink in this pen was just not compatible with being brushed over. It was smearing a lot, so I decided not to do that and have to keep in mind that if I want colour, to put that down and then use the black pen over the top of that. I didn't notice at all until looking at this footage that I completely forgot to put the lines in the bottom right habits section. I'll have to go and add those in now. To the section on the right, I just added a place for all my memories. Nothing fancy here, just drew an outline and gave it a title at the top and added some washi tape decoration to the bottom. My next page is going to be a space for my to-do list, and I'm also adding a little section for any notes I need to make. My to-do list is always the bigger section because I write everything down that I need to do across the whole month. And then the notes, I don't tend to need to make that many notes, but there might be a few things that I need to jot down, so I've just given that a smaller box at the bottom. Again, this is really simple, nothing too difficult here, just doing a simple outline with a black pen, giving the corners a rounded edge. And then in the bottom left, I decided to risk doing the watercolour straight onto the page because it was quite a small area, so I was hoping that it wouldn't affect the paper too much. And I didn't blob it on too thickly this time. And I just used a washi tape to cut out a little moon to fit in that space. I do have one of those circle drawers, but sometimes you just kind of know what size you want it to be when you look at an object, so sometimes it's just easier to draw around something rather than measuring it out. When it was dry, I stuck it down and then also added a few gold stars. I used some washi tape in the top sort of narrower bit because that fit a lot better, and also added some stars there too. So over onto the next page, and this is going to be my gratitude log. And I just find it really nice, and it keeps you in a positive frame of mind to write something down that you are grateful for every single day. I've just drawn a simple box with rounded corners and adding the title with the gold paint again. To the left side, I write down all the numbers of the month. To add a bit more interest to the page, I'm going to highlight every other line with that light pink Tombow brush pen. And I think it just zhuzhes up the page a bit when you have quite a large area of white space. Because I decided to centre this box on the page, I'm doing a bit of decoration above and below it. I'm painting in a narrow strip of the blue watercolour and then doing some gold leaves over the top. The small square I painted on the opposite page seemed to dry absolutely fine and didn't wrinkle up the paper too much, so I decided to just go straight in onto the page with the paint again and not use the watercolour paper. It seems to be working absolutely fine, and I have used watercolour paint in notebook therapy journals plenty of times before. It's usually fine, but it just does struggle a bit if you want to add a really thick layer of paint or really blob it on in places. Watercolour can soak through sometimes. Because the top section was quite narrow, I decided to paint the gold moon rather than cut it out of pink paper, and I just did a load of little stars and dots all the way along to complement that. Onto my weekly spreads, and this month I'm going to do a Dutch door. I will use the space at the top of the page for decorative elements, so that kind of cuts down on the amount of time you need to spend decorating. On the bottom half of the page will just be the grids where I have my days of the week, and I won't really do any decoration in that area. It will just be on the top, so that each page you flip over you'll see the same decoration, and it just cuts down on time needed to create each weekly spread. I know some people like to create their weekly spreads each week as they go along, which I think does give some flexibility for if you wanted to have a bit more space for something on one week and less space in another, or you just wanted to change the arrangement of your setups. But for me, I prefer to get it all done in one go, because I will either forget to do the setup and then halfway through the week I'll need to use it and be like, oh no, I haven't done it. Or I will just lose the motivation to do it entirely and I'll just not do weekly spreads. So I'm starting off by cutting off the top part of all my pages and then going in with my watercolour paint. Again, I'm risking doing it straight on the page this time. It has held up pretty well so far, so I don't really want to make the journal too bulky by adding lots of extra watercolour paper. And also if you add too much extra paper, sometimes it can make it a little bit uneven to write on. This month I'm doing a really simple grid setup and I'm just drawing out 6 boxes, one for each day of the week, and then I will do both days of the weekend in the last box. And just to sort of separate those pages from the decoration at the top, I'm adding in a strip of the washi tape. I'm not doing tabs this time for the pages. I would usually when I do this sort of setup, but normally I would have a whole week across the double page spread rather than doing 1 week per page. So this way it would actually only mean that there would need to be 2 tabs, and that would probably look a bit odd. So yep, decided not to do them this time. So after all of that was done, I went and cut myself out another moon and stuck that to the left side of the page. And then to the right, I added my blossom branches. Then all around the moon and in the gap between that and the branches, I added lots of sparkles and dots and stars. Okay, so this wasn't my original idea for the weekly spreads, and I kind of changed what I wanted to do right at the last minute. And because of that, I ended up with the last page not having a weekly spread on it, and I needed to find something to fill the gap. And I was trying to think for ages what I could put there, because all the rest of my setup was everything I needed. I couldn't think of anything else that I would use. So it's a bit random, but I decided to leave a little space for drawings or doodles, because this year I've kind of set myself a target of trying to draw a lot more. Obviously I draw quite often for setting up my bullet journal, but I don't take the time that I used to do illustrations and drawings, and I really enjoy that, so I'm definitely going to try and make more time for it this month. So I thought I would dedicate a little space to it, because at the moment I'm just sort of doing drawings here and there in any spare bit of paper I've got. So if that goes well, I might add it to future setups as well. Thank you so much for watching this video, I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed this setup, then please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment if you like. Also let me know what your theme is this coming month, and consider subscribing if you want to see more arts and crafts and bullet journals. Thanks so much again, bye!